welcoming everybody and to ask you to, I guess we'll call the roll to make sure we have a quorum, and that will be meaning we're able to conduct business officially. Heather Metz.
Here.
And Catherine Burgwin.
Here.
And Mary Peck.
Here.
And Stuart Martins. Here. And Janet Taylor Smith.
Here.
And Kevin Carr. Here. And Nettie Green.
Here.
And Sam Cunningham is not here. And Susan Morrison. And I'm Charlie Carlo. And we recognize our ex officio member, Richard Byrne, our commissioner. Thank you, Dick, for your inspiration to get the green team going, and now has evolved into the Environment Committee. Dick reminds me that the committee has been formed by the statement from the commissioners, which I'll pass around to you all, giving the rationale for why we were formed, and a mission statement, those sorts of things. We may want to revise the mission statement if we want to at a later time. Stuart, I know, has got a draft mission statement that he was going to present to us. So I'll let you all take a look at this, and we'll have questions. We can bring that back up later. But I would like us to go around first, before we get started with any other business, to introduce ourselves to each other, to say what it is about you that you were inspired to want to apply for being on this committee, and any other thing about your background that you'd like to share with the rest of us. Want to start, Heather?
Sure. My background is in civil engineering. I worked in water and construction. And after having some issues with sick children and recovering them, I learned a lot about how the environment impacts our health. And I think that would be my focus here. While I recognize that the global problem is huge, I also want to make sure we don't forget about the impact on us day to day, on our health and the members of our community and the people that come and visit our town.
Nettie?
I'm Nettie Green, and I have been interested in the environment for a long time, just personally, and relate to the children thing, because I do have a granddaughter that, has issues with food and this type of thing. I'm a retired teacher. I always enjoyed teaching. Children are natural environmentalists because they're very closely connected to the earth in ways that sometimes we as adults aren't. I now work part-time at Abbott's Mill Nature Center as a teacher naturalist, where I've learned a great deal about environment. And personally, I have recycled and been into environment ever since I've been an adult. So very, very important to me. I feel called to do this.
Hi, everybody. My name's Catherine Burgwin, and my previous experience actually is physical therapy. So I have worked my career with working with profoundly disabled children. My desire to be on this committee has really been more of a personal desire. I am an avid gardener, and when I first started using Roundup and things in my garden, I went to the nursery and said, why don't I have any worms? Why are there no worms in my earth? So that started quite a long time ago for me to start gardening organically. And I'm very interested in native plants and the value of native plants for the whole ecosystem. And have nothing but native plants in my garden now here in Rehoboth. And then my other reason, other than I'm just very passionate about taking care of our earth, I'm a volunteer for mayor, and just recently have joined our church's green team. And I think that's where I first met you, was at a mayor presentation when we were talking about possible oil and gas drilling off the coast. And Charlie has this way of kind of reeling people in, if anybody noticed that, with his enthusiasm. So I'm very excited to be a member, and thank you very much.
Well, I'm a lawyer, and when I first got out of law school, my first job, and this was before I really had a lot of knowledge of the environment. I just happened to get a position clerking in Pennsylvania for their environmental hearing board. And so that kind of, you know, I was 25, and I've been at it ever since, working as a staff attorney for Pennsylvania DEP. And then after I left DEP to focus on my family for a number of years, then when my kids got a little older, I started volunteering with the Delaware Nature Society. And you know, once you start volunteering, people keep asking you to do more. That seems to be the way it goes. And so now I am on their board of directors and chair of their advocacy committee. And through those activities, I have gotten to meet a number of state and local officials, mostly in Newcastle County. And so recently, Newcastle County, Delaware has been doing a lot of their new county executive environment is one of his priorities. They've been doing some great stuff, and so I started thinking, you know, some of these ideas could be applied in Rehoboth Beach, and I was just thinking about how would I approach the city of Rehoboth Beach with some of my ideas when I saw this notice that you were forming a committee here. I do have a property here. And so I really have some ideas. I'd love to be on it. And so here I am.
Great.
Thanks, Mary. Good morning. I'm Janet Taylor Smith. I think I know most of you. I'm a retired teacher as well. Back when I was teaching, I started a green team at our school. And you were absolutely right. Children they're more connected than we are as adults generally. And it all started when I was teaching a second grade class at the time, and we had a little article about where does trash go? And it was quite interesting and eye-opening to me that, all hands went up and, the trash person comes and picks it up. I said, you're right, that person does. What happens to it? Well, silence. They had no idea. So from that inspired the green team at our school, which is still running after I retired, yay. And my passion just took off after that. I mean, it just didn't stop. So it's, I was recycling back during the first Earth Day. I go way back when I was considered to be a radical of sorts. Anyone that didn't believe what the norm was, I remember I even, for my styrofoam egg cartons, there was a place in California that took them, so I shipped them out there. You know, I was like, so yeah. That had always been a passion of mine, is what do I do with, I hate throwing things out. You know, I'm not a hoarder, but I'm like, okay, well, could I use that? And possibly, and the teacher in me usually finds a way to use something. And it just blossomed from that. So when we came back, we were native Delawareans. When we retired, we wanted to be in Rehoboth Beach, which is where we are. And from that, I started a green team here locally. And we've been doing, we have now a water bottle filler fountain. We are selling now these. We're doing everything we can to say no plastic, no single-use plastic. From that, I also started a group of churches put together, and it doesn't have to be just churches, but it's Delmarva Green. And we get together and we compare notes and talk about ways that we can work together, because power in numbers. My focus here, I mean, it's hard to just pinpoint one thing, but if I were to pinpoint one, I think it would be the restaurants in Rehoboth and trying to get the message out, especially from the green drinks that we saw, Charlie, that night with the person that came from Annapolis, I believe, and all the wonderful things she was doing. I would love to do something like that, where we could show them options, where they don't have to have styrofoam and plastic stuff, and just do something like that. Because we have a lot of restaurants here in town, and just, you know, bring it up as best I can and just offer it as a possibility and see where it goes.
Great.
Thank you.
Susan?
My name is Susan Morrison. I'm a retired United Methodist bishop. I served churches in the Baltimore, Washington area, but when I was a bishop, I was assigned first to Philadelphia, and that included the whole Poconos area and like that. And then I was up in Vermont and Eastern New York, which included the Adirondack. So just from the city life to a different area, although I had a lot of cities in the area I served. When I retired down here, I wanted to get involved in the local community. So I'm very involved in the Community Resource Center and have since the beginning of some of its netting roads. But one of the things, first thing I did was farmer's market, and I was in charge of the green tent that brought in the different groups to be there, and I was on their board for a long time. And now I just coordinate the volunteers for the farmer's market. But I started doing that, and that started to raise my awareness. I'm a gardener also, and I'm now trying pollinator plants, and we have solar and bird feeders, and I'm also just recommending a book, The Overstory. I'm in the midst of reading that, and I highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't. In some ways, I've come late to getting involved actively in the issue, but it's clearly one I'm very much committed to in my late life. In my late season on the journey, so to speak.
I'm Stuart Martins, and I am a health coach here in Delaware. So I work with private clients, and I also do public workshops for the state of Delaware Public Health. And I have seen in my own personal life where garbage and the environment is really important, and it's just in my crawl of what's going on. And I actually was on the board of trustees of Goodwill Industries in Washington, D.C. 30 years ago. So I actually got to see what happens to trash. And people think they're giving to a charity, but it's interesting to see the life cycle of a piece of trash, or what somebody distributes to a charity, and what happens, how it can give somebody a job. Goodwill Industries works in sheltered employment. They help people who can't get employed in the regular industries, and they do clothes where they do this stuff. Also, a lot of the clothes that can't be sold at these charities, what happens to it? And a lot of stuff goes into landfills and garbages. Some of it does get shipped overseas in 40-foot containers to third world countries. So it was really fascinating watching that for about 9 years, and watching the cycle, seeing how people could get employment. Stuff could be reused and made good of. So it was really a fascinating experience, and it never left me. So it was really interesting. So I would love to see a real collaboration between the kids, as a number of you have talked to your teachers. I am also on the board of the Boys and Girls Club here in Rehoboth. I also am on the board of the Village Volunteers, which just came into Rehoboth, and they help seniors age in place. There can be a real collaboration between the older generation, the younger generation, and the education. And I've mentioned to Charlie that education, I think, could be a huge part of this whole puzzle, and just educating, and by doing action, and then at the same time educating people as to what's going on. Some of you were on the unofficial committee where we talked about, there's a hotel program that I was involved. I wasn't involved with, but I used to train at a hotel in California that had a green program. So there could be a hotel motel green program. I suspect if there's only 1,500 people that live here in Rehoboth proper, and there's maybe 400,000 or 500,000 people that come into our gorgeous city in the summer, somewhere, by attracting businesses and making businesses profitable with this thing. I was a businessman. I was a car dealer for 40 years. The idea is to have businesses prosper in this thing and have them be profitable, so they don't go away and we don't have turnover in businesses. So to the education part, to make this one of the most gorgeous, greenest towns in the East Coast, which it has been on a couple of magazines, it was fourth on the list. What does that do to attracting visitors? And I love the visitors. I love the 99 days of summer when you see people coming here for vacation, because yes, it's a madhouse, but you see people coming here for a good time, and mostly all you see is smiles and laughing, congestion, traffic, trash. there is no way to educate people on how to throw this into recycling, throw this into something. So there are other solutions to this. So I think the education thing is a huge component, and our packaging, using plastic that we have used in so much. I have read way too many articles from scientists of how it is contributing to the ridiculous increase in cancer rates, autism rates, other kinds of chronic disease rates, and that's what I do for a living really now, and I want to reverse that. I want to be part of the solution that helps reverse that. So that's what I'm here for.
Hey, my name's Kevin Carr. I'm an electrical engineer, worked for a company called Con Edison for 25, 30 years. And it's a power company, so I can bring my power experience to it. And also, I have a utility right now, and I don't pay them any money.
How do you do that?
I have solar. So I've had that 2.5 years, and they're actually paying me a little bit of money. So it's a nice thing. And I'm interested in single-use plastic. I know the state of California is pushing for it. I don't know if they've been able to pass it, but maybe a state like a first state, Delaware, could be the first state.
We have a bill,
We have a
law that's
bill?
coming in.
A bill?
A law that passed and is going in effect in January, so you won't be able to get plastic bags in the supermarkets anymore here in Delaware starting in January. But apparently Wawa has convinced the state that they do not have to observe the law because they're a restaurant and not a store. So we're still going to see plastic bags.
There's all sorts of workarounds that
Yeah.
different companies also in California can
Yeah.
work around. You know, you need it for medical.
Yeah. But no, but we are going to have, Delaware is one of the first. We are going to have a single-use ban coming in. Not perfect, but yeah.
I'm also a Village of Old Landing. I'm in the Architectural Review Committee, so I volunteer for that. All my jobs are volunteer now. And, I like it.
I'm Charlie Garlow. I'm a lawyer also, guilty as charged with the handcuffs on me now. And I'm so pleased to have you all come and join. It's great to see a variety of different skills and talents and interests. It's not exactly like the bar scene in Star Wars that you're bringing those different kinds of looks to you. I will say that I have been interested in the environment since I was in the Boy Scouts, and even before I was an adult, Nettie, and consider myself still a scout. I've worked for the United States EPA headquarters in Washington, D.C. for 27 years as an attorney enforcing the Clean Air Act, so I have an interest in clean air. And that's probably why I got started on electric cars. I'm also the president of the Delaware Electric Vehicle Association, which we call DEVA, after the initials, not after Madonna or Beyonce. But I have an interest in solar and electric cars as a result. I'll stop there. I could go on for a lot longer, but I won't. I'd like to recognize that we have some guests in our audience visiting with us. Mayor Coons, thank you for your leadership in getting our committee off the ground. And Evan Miller, who was a staff of the city, doing a great job, already got top awards of your project manager. Is that right, Evan?
Projects coordinator.
Coordinator applies for grants and lots of helpful things. So we're glad to have you both here on our launching of this committee, the inaugural committee.
What's your name again?
Evan Miller.
Thanks.
So, continuing with the agenda, we've done a brief introduction and we've done the roll call. Correspondence. Believe it or not, we actually had some correspondence come in at the very last minute, forwarded by Mayor Coons to me, and that was from my friend and neighbor, Jennifer Duncan, who has an electric golf cart that is street worthy and asks the parking committee, not us, to work with the environment committee to see if some consideration can't be made for those low-speed vehicles, which are less polluting, smaller, don't take up as much room, and there may be lots more of them in the future. So if anybody wants to take a look at the correspondence we've received from her on that topic, if anybody wants to be the liaison between us and the parking committee, let us know, and we'll be glad to have you be our point person on that. Don't think we've received any other correspondence, though, from anybody yet, but that's one of the agenda items. Let me move right along to our new business. First is to select a secretary to help us write our minutes. You may remember that I sent an email to you all in advance, letting you know that I would be asking somebody to volunteer for that position, suggesting that if you didn't, want to jump in for doing it for a whole year, you could volunteer for 3 months or 6 months, and then we can pass the duties on to someone else. So I thought I would stop and see if anybody would like to volunteer for that role.
I can do it, Charlie.
Thank you, Catherine. I tell you, I didn't put the fix in earlier, although I could have. Didn't want to.
I'll pass everything by you, though, of course.
You have a good-looking binder and notebook there, so.
Hired.
Yeah.
Try
Thank you,
to
Catherine. I appreciate it.
retired physical therapist in a school taught me how to do that. Okay, you're welcome. My pleasure.
Very good. The next thing we have on our agenda is a review of the survey results, which I thought would be interesting and instructive to those of us who are here. The city commissioned a survey of citizens and visitors and businesses and others to see what they thought about various topics. And where did I put my copy of the survey results? They're around here. I know they are somewhere. But in any event, the long and short of it is that our citizens are very supportive of the basic mission of here it is, down at the bottom of the pile. Very supportive of our efforts, I guess you'd say, in that they suggested in one of the questions, question 23, should the city of Rehoboth Beach take steps to become a leader in green practices and ecological stewardship? And of the 572 people who answered, strongly agree was the highest percentage at 43%, and agree was 28%. So altogether, we've got at least 80% of the people are agreeing that we ought to be leaders. And so that's what we are. That's wind in our sails, if you will, to push us ahead. Great expectations for us. Don't get nervous just because the pressure's on, but I thought you might be interested in that one. There are some other interesting findings here too about what do you think we should do about transportation trends, thinking about that transportation issue that was brought to our attention. Should we promote electric vehicles, ride sharing, bike safety, etc.? Since I'm an electric vehicle guy, I was particularly thrilled to see that some 60% more strongly agreed that we should help the development of electric vehicles here in our area. So there's a lot of questions in this survey, and if you haven't had a chance to go to see the survey reveal presentation, I believe it's up on our civic web. Lots of good answers to things like there, but let me just highlight those 2 notes and send it around to you to take a look and inspire you to take a further look at the survey results, because it's basically all favorable to us. Any questions about the survey?
When was that done?
Is it on the front page of that, Nettie? It's the back page, maybe, it's around the other side.
October the 28th,
Oh,
right
not
before
too-
Halloween.
Not too long ago.
Yeah, it was done a little earlier than that, but that's
That's
when
what
Okay, that's when
it was
the,
reported.
That's right.
when it was reported.
Mayor Coons, you have a comment on that?
Yeah, it was basically done throughout the summer. We're in the process of doing our comprehensive development plan, which is something that we have to do for the state every 5 years. And so our outside consultant put together, working with the planning commission that's working with CDP, a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions. And they actually got over 1,000 responses from residents, visitors, as well as businesses. So there are a lot of questions in there away from your committee, but I think it was very helpful because in the past, they've asked questions among a much smaller group, and now they open it up. So you have a pretty diverse answer base, if you will, for a variety of questions.
Yeah, I remember that it did ask if you were vacationing or something along those lines, yeah.
But they had it open, I believe, for at least a month and a half, maybe 2 months.
Okay.
And I think it's kind of exciting the way people responded to our city being a leader because there's this group, a national group, where there are many cities that are leaders and get this 5-star thing. What's the name of it? But anyway, we saw some results of this in like Denver and Asheville, North Carolina, and they're listed nationally. And if Rehoboth could follow some of these guidelines,
Yes, 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 yes.
this might be it might be really helpful for people in Rehoboth to see what's happening and to be proud of being a leader, following some of these guidelines.
I think they pay more attention also.
Yeah, yeah,
To their own way of how they deal with things.
yeah.
I had the link for that. I'll look it back up and present it to you.
I just thought that kind of connected,
Yes.
really connected with that.
Are there guidelines in that document, or is it just
Yeah, they're
questions?
guidelines. It's like, well, I mean, this particular group has energy concerns, recycling concerns, all kinds of different, at many different levels for communities that have done this or are going to do it by 2020 or are going to do it by 2030, this kind of thing. They've done certain things, but they've not done everything on the list. And I think this would be very reinforcing for us and for the city.
There are probably a number of different organizations that have
That do
different,
that.
you know, the
Yeah.
building for 100% renewable energy or different
yeah.
sort of categories that you can fit in. You should know, of course, that Rehoboth Beach is already in a leadership role in this regard, in one of these regards, in that our mayor has signed on as being one of the U.S. climate mayors, along with Mayor Ted Becker of Lewis and a host of others around the United States. So there are a number of different ways, I think, that communities, counties, and others can raise their hand to want to do good works in the green area. And of course, we have to translate those good intentions into good actions. And that's what we're hoping to do by making recommendations. Again, we're not taking actions, we're making recommendations to our elected commissioners. But to the extent that we can present cogent, well-founded recommendations, more likely that our recommendations will be accepted. So leaning on the experience of other cities and counties, saying what works and what didn't work, and only recommending that we do the things that work is probably good to learn from these other places.
Yeah, I don't know if you all saw the link that Charlie forwarded that for what the city of Newark, Delaware,
It's extensive.
they put together a whole plan and they got a big grant from the state to do it.
$80,000.
Yeah, and they have set their goals, and they had they have the resource of University of Delaware right there, which is a big part of the plan. And so they're a whole different situation, but there's a lot of that we could do, just a city in our own state. We could they had a committee like ours, we could get in touch with them and say, where do you think we should start with just to get a grant? Who are your contacts? And, I think that's definitely something that would be work for this committee to propose some goals for the city, to get a master plan of, like, for example, we already have this tree work, and that's part of what Newark has. We're going to have this many more trees by this date is in the plan, and there's already some things in place here that can kind of be put together. And now that we have a separate environmental committee, there's a lot of different other committees that are working on environmental issues that we can kind of see what everybody's already working on and how to put it together into a master plan.
We know that we do have a tree committee here
Yeah,
in Rehoboth Beach.
sure.
And we may want to have a liaison from our group to work with them or attend their meetings, report back to the whole group
Yeah.
here as to what they're up to and what we might be able to do to work together as a synergy to get something
Yeah, and
terrific coming
the
out of that.
Boardwalk Committee is working on recycling issues,
Yes.
apparently already working on. So I think in the early stages of this committee, it would be good to just kind of take inventory of what the work that's already going on, and see what other goals we might want to add to it.
Well, Mary, thank you for introducing the idea of recycling on the boardwalk, because Stan Mills, as previous commissioner, has for a long time been working on the Boardwalk and Beach Committee, and very interested in getting recycling going. So we're getting closer and closer to making that happen. He shared with me this report from 2003 on recycling at the Rehoboth Beach Boardwalk, which I'll pass around for you all to take a look at. And we can always scan that and send it out to everybody to read at your leisure. I guess I'll volunteer to do that. Yes, we have had a lot of thought already on this topic.
And I have an email version of it, thanks to Evan. So,
Great. That
just remind me to bump that.
Thank you. I'll do that there. Yes, well, so there's been a lot of work or thought gone into that already.
Right.
We're grateful to Stan Mills for having taken trips up and down the East Coast to visit with other New Jersey
Oh,
beaches.
yeah.
To see what they're doing and what works and what doesn't work. And I'm sure he didn't have any time left over to go swimming at all these beaches. He's not that kind of a guy, but a strictly business fellow. So yes, but it seems to me that we've sort of started getting into the next topic, besides the survey results, which was discussion of possible topics our committee might wish to pursue, such as recycling, invasive species, for those of you who are gardeners, and plastics, whether it's plastic straws or plastic single-use anything, styrofoam, clamshell, take-home boxes, helium balloons. I've brought along with me some of the information from a group called Never Let Them Go, which is about helium balloons and how a lot of people have, helium balloons that say, let's have a good time with them, and then little kids forget and they fly up in the air, and then they go out to the ocean, and sea turtles and others get hurt by them. I would note that already Grotto Pizza here in Rehoboth Beach has agreed not to have plastic helium balloons, so kudos and thank you to them. Maybe we could think about recommending that, or investigating first, and then recommending a citywide program on, maybe it would be just encouragement first rather than being a regulatory requirement. But that's another item that's on the list here: helium balloons, stormwater issues, global warming, energy audits, electric cars, all sorts of topics. So we could get started on a lot of those things. I would like to go around the room again, if I may, to ask you to identify maybe two, to start with at least, of those sorts of sub-issues that you might like to focus on or be part of a rump group or subcommittee or whatever you want to call it, team, to do further pursuit in that area, and let us know what you're thinking and your committees, subcommittees thinking might be. You want to start again, Heather?
I would be happy to. As you guys know, if you've done this already, it was very hard to narrow it down to 2 items. First, I narrowed it down to 10. And then I discussed it. Actually, I'm fortunate that my daughter is studying environmental engineering, and my best friend, both of her daughters are studying environmental science right now. So I talked with them, and I also took the issues that are near and dear to me and have been in my experience. So the first one I picked, I think a couple of you even touched on it already, is the use of Roundup. So there, as you know, in Roundup, there's a chemical called glyphosate, which has recently been shown in U.S. court to definitively have caused someone's cancer. We all know that it causes cancer, but it actually was shown in a court. That person is receiving multi-millions of dollars from Monsanto as compensation, but he will probably lose his life, unfortunately. But if you want to read about that article, you can Google it. It's easy to read about. So as we know, it's a carcinogen, and as we know, a lot of people in our town have lawn services that they don't know what kind of chemicals on their lawn. I think if you knocked on someone's door and asked them, what did that person just spray on your lawn, they have no idea. And they probably don't read those little things that they put on your lawn that says, caution, these are chemicals, they're toxic, and you shouldn't go on your lawn.
Well, you know, the EPA still says it's a safe.
Right, but the World Health Organization
Oh,
disagrees.
I know, I'm with you on it.
Yeah,
I'm just
no,
saying.
I know,
if you're saying, why don't people know?
And we know, we kind of probably in this room, we know why, because Monsanto is a very powerful company. So we don't need to get into that, but I think that there are a number, three that come to mind. One of the biggest is LA County has now outlawed the use of glyphosate. So if they can do it, I kind of feel like we can do it. And again, I know that most people in town are not taking care of their own lawns. So I think there's kind of 3 aspects of it. The first is personal use. educating people, and maybe that just requires a table at the farmer's market to educate people that while the label is scary and Monsanto tells you that it's okay, but it's really not, and why. So personal use. The second one is the lawn care companies. So they're going to need to be educated. And I don't know what legislation looks like. I am not a political person at all. I'm a scientist and engineer, so I don't know how that process will work. So hopefully you guys will have more input on how we would come up with some type of regulation or whatever you would call it to do that. And the second is anything that the city itself pays for. So if we're hiring lawn care companies and they're out there spraying Roundup on our common spaces, that is one we can stop right away because we have the authority to do that, I would think. We probably have contracts with those companies that may be over the course of a year. But there are companies, I personally at my house, we use Lawns Unlimited, and they only use organic products at my house, so it's possible. There's also weeding, which works really, really well. But anyway, so that is a big focus for me, and I did watch my neighbor once last year spray Roundup right down the property line, and I was beside me. I actually called the city, and I said, you know, I was so upset this person is doing this, you know, what can we do? And they basically told me nothing. So that's my first one. My second one, and this has not been on anybody's list, so I'm just going to throw it out there. It's not even, I just read the entire Newark thing. It's not on there. But Mayor Coons, I don't know if you remember, I got up and spoke at the meeting. So I would like to find out if I can find out more information about that topic item from that meeting about the telephone companies coming in and putting antennas in our town. So I don't want to bore you guys with technical stuff, and you and I could probably talk about this more. Everybody knows, right, 4G, that's how you get your quick lickety-split wireless service, right?
Split. I
Well,
haven't heard that in a long time.
It's fast enough anyway, right? So now they're inventing this new thing called 5G, and it sounds like magic, right? It's quicker, it's faster, it's powerful, it's this, it's that. Well, what a lot of people don't realize is that you have to get into the details of waves and electricity and all kinds of things to bore you. But the main idea is that because it's so much more powerful, it's a completely different wavelength. And so that tower that's on the top of the water tower that probably with 4G serves the whole town, you can't just put a 5G one up there and it does the same thing. It doesn't work like that. They have to be within 500 feet of each other. They have to be lower to the ground, and they have exponentially more radiation than 4G. So what we're talking about is, and this, there have been other communities, we're dealing with that at our high school. They want to put towers at our high school right next to our children. There are a number of communities that are fighting back against this. The power companies are very powerful, as you know, and they're coming in and they're saying, well, this is going to be great. Everybody wants faster phone service, but they don't bother to tell you that there are known health risks. The NIH has studied it for 15 years. They found evidence of cancer, anxiety, sleep disorders, autoimmune problems. This is a real thing. I swear I'm not making this up. There's an article that I have here from a very trusted an organization I've been part of for a very, very long time about the dangers of 5G. And if you think there's no science on it, all of these footnotes are studies that were done on the effects of 5G. That's just for one article. It's a 3-page article. That's the footnotes. So anyway, to summarize, that is something that I would like to protect our town from and educate people about the real dangers. While they think it's great that their phone is going to work faster, there's always a cost. There's always a cost. And then the other issue that I haven't heard anybody raise, and I'll just, like, this is my 2.1 issue, is anybody talking about them wanting to put the giant wind turbines? Did you guys all get that letter in the mail? Is that on the list? Is anyone on anyone's list? Okay, your turn, you're up.
No, okay, is it my turn?
Those are my 2 issues.
I think it is.
I'm not allowed to put up either of those things, but I will certainly need more input. I need more information. I need to learn about maybe what's been done in the past, or I don't want to repeat anything that's already been done, or try something that you guys already said no to. So those are the
Thank you
things
for your
I need
enthusiasm and
information
your
on.
fire in the belly for the topics that you care
We all
about.
have quite a bit of fire. Yeah.
Nettie?
I think as a committee, my feeling is we need to deal with the big issues that sometimes come and hit us sideways, like this wind farm thing. And there's a lot of money behind those letters that were sent to all the property owners. And there's a lot of money behind, these Monsanto and behind, and money in our culture speaks, and it makes it very difficult to fight. So I think we have to deal with the macro and the micro. So the micro with me, I had 4, but I'll try to.
It's hard.
I'll try to get it down to 2. I think immediately, I would really like to work with this boardwalk committee with the recycling. My daughter came to town, and she's from Vermont. Okay, she's from near Burlington, Vermont, and they're a lot greener, as Susan probably knows, than as you come further south. But she was just stunned that there was no place. She even asked a policeman if there was any place she could recycle her coffee, the plastic on top of her coffee and the cardboard that the coffee was in. And he said, you can just throw it in the trash. And there was no place, and she was just stunned, absolutely stunned. And it stuns me too, particularly since we have a law in the state of Delaware that we do have to recycle. And anyway, there are 24 bins right now going up and down the boardwalk, and we're not even talking in town. And that's different than in the summertime. In the summertime, there are a lot more, but there are 24 right now. I think if we could get 24 places where we have trash maybe, and this could be decorated by kids or have education on the outside, but trash on one side and recycling of plastic bottles and cans on the other side with a very small opening like I see in Grove Park. There's one of these that has a small place where you can't put trash, and that this actually is recycled. I'm also concerned about the black plastic bags that we have in these 24 recycling bins. They take a long time they take 10 to 20 years to disintegrate, according to Google, in the landfill. And I think there must be a better lining that we could use, but I'm very confused. And maybe some of you who are scientists can tell me what a different liner would be. Whether it's biodegradable or compostable. I know compost takes oxygen to compost, and landfills don't have oxygen. So, I mean, I can't figure out those different types of bags. I've also talked with Ernie Lopez, who says that if we do this locally, there can be some money from the state for helping Rehoboth with things like that. I enjoy politics, and I like getting into that kind of stuff, and I think I can do some of that. The other thing are businesses in town, and these are just micro things. They're not big issues. I think the really big issue is the wind farm, but I would like to listen to businesses and find out what they're doing that is green. I wrote a letter to the editor about Rise Up, and about the fact that they gave a discount when you go in there with your coffee mug, and they give a 25-cent discount.
That's the Rise Up coffee place up by the traffic circle.
Yeah, Rise Up. But neighbors of mine run the coffee mill, and they were quite upset. And I apologize to them because they use paper straws, they use wood stirrers. They don't give a discount. But I really would like to know I'd like to listen first. Then I would like for us to maybe set up something that gives maybe a mayor's award or a council award for businesses that follow certain guidelines with their restaurants, and businesses that aren't using plastic bags, that don't use the little styrofoam take-home containers, maybe that have come up with a creative thing, like Rise Up did, of giving a discount.
You should know the Starbucks also gives a discount if you bring in your own ceramic mug.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
many, a
But
lot of
those kinds of things we need to notice. We need to have some type of
Thank you.
way to show everybody that, okay, we're not leaving out Coffee Mill, we're not leaving out this group or that group. They're doing things. And I think it's very important to listen, and I'd be glad to go around and interview, but then go around and, are you following these things? And if you are, yay, you get the stamp. You get the green stamp or whatever. It's just, those are two things I'd like to work on.
Perhaps we can check to see if we as the Environment Committee are authorized to give out thank yous or attaboys or awards of some kind to local businesses. Mayor Coons, did you have a comment earlier about the boardwalk? I saw your hand go up, the boardwalk recycling and.
Sure. I have a comment on a number of those things. The boardwalk recycling, just informationally, because of what's come in from Beach and Boardwalk Committee, the city manager is working on a number of things for the upcoming budget season, which is we'll have in place by April 1st. And hopefully we're going to do a pilot program to start on the boardwalk. And many of you may not know this or know this. 10 plus years ago, they used to recycle on the boardwalk.
I remember
and on the beach. And they had separate cans. For some reason, at some point, the administration decided we don't need them. And I don't know if it was so much we don't need them, but the expense of recycling. Not a lot of people recycle from a municipal perspective. They have outside consultants or whatever to do that. So the plan is to start a pilot program on the boardwalk this summer. And that would be to hopefully have an additional can next to the trash can with the small opening. We're not going to be able to, the pizza boxes, they go everywhere anyway. But hopefully, from an educational perspective, if they see the small openings, they'll utilize the small openings. But what we found out, and I don't know if it was from the boardwalk committee or from the city, that on the boardwalk, there's 125 cans.
Kevin told us that.
Yeah, so that means 125 additional cans and staff.
And that's boardwalk only.
And that's the
Not
boardwalk
beach.
only.
There's another 125 on the beach.
Yes.
Yes.
How about just the 24 that you have now? You couldn't do the recycling just with the 24 you have now?
Well, I think the plan would be to have it a much bigger project and a pilot on the boardwalk rather than, in specific areas, so that, the visitors that are coming here, we do get comments about people saying, where do I go with my recycling? There's nothing to do. Well, so hopefully this will give everybody an opportunity to see not only that we're doing it, but we have places for them to go. I'm sure if we do it on the boardwalk, somebody's going to say, well, how come you don't do it at the beach? Or how come you don't do it down where Old Tap? Well, it takes time, it takes money, and I think this is a good start for us from that perspective. As far as the windmills go, I don't know if I sent this to you, Charlie, but just yesterday, Senator Hocker, who represents the southern part of the state, sent out a newsletter, if you will, saying that the time period for discussion on windmills has been extended, I think, to January 15th.
Wow, okay.
So there's going to
Second
be
extension.
more time period on that. And just so everybody knows, I know there's been, heavy duty conversation on both sides, and I know that they had a meeting down at Indian River High School that was pretty explosive. All the facts are not out. And we had a conversation with Secretary Garvin, separately the mayors from the local coastal towns, The MOU is not binding whatsoever. This is a start of what they're talking about. But a lot of the facts aren't on the table. And hopefully Orsted and the state will be working further and further to get better facts out there. We spoke to the governor a week ago and said the same thing to him. There needs to be more information. And, everybody's got a different perspective. Up in Rhode Island, they have 5 right off the coast of Block Island, and everybody loves them, especially the people on Block Island, because they no longer have to use generators. And it seems like the tourists like it up there, and the fishermen like it up there. However, for some reason down here, 15 miles off the shore is too close. As you know, over in Europe, some of the countries over in Europe, 75 or 80% is coming from some kind of natural situation. So it's something that I think in the next 50 years is going to be here. Hopefully it's sooner than that. But all the information's not out yet, and hopefully it'll happen.
Is there any way we could get, there have been authorities, or quote, authorities that have talked against the wind farm. And this notice, of course, that went out to all the landowners. Is there any way of getting an authority from the University of Delaware or somebody that knows all the science and everything about, that could come and be an alternate voice? Because that was a shouting match. I was not able to be there, but my husband was there and he said it was a ridiculous shouting match that was not controlled.
Unfortunately, right now, Delaware is sitting in the background watching. Maryland has approved taking advantage of the leases
There's
offshore.
resentment there, yeah.
And so Annapolis voted it in, and it's taking place. When it takes place, it's probably in the next 5 years. Whereas Ocean City apparently wasn't involved in the conversation, or
Voted it down.
they didn't pay attention early on. Now they're involved and they want it 33 miles offshore. As most of you probably know, Governor Markell was very much involved in trying to bring blue water wind here and do something 8-7 years ago.
Right.
However, with the economic situation, that kind of faded, and I think blue water wind is no longer a business, and now I think it's Orsted or someone like that. So that it's now cropped back up, but Delaware is still watching from the balcony, if you will, and waiting to see what happens. But now the fact that these turbines will be off the shore of Delaware's got to react. And the thing about the wires coming to the Fenwick Island State Park has upset the people in Fenwick Island and South Bethany and so on. And the fact that it's 18 million is kind of like a drop in the bucket for what it's going to cost for all these turbines to be offshore. So again, it's still up in the air, and I hope there'll be more information, and I hope there won't be those shouting matches. But to your point about having somebody from the University of Delaware, well, apparently
They're always there.
apparently there is a
I've been to
group
many,
on
they're
one
usually there.
side from the University of
Oh, yeah,
Delaware
I'm
that says
saying
that
on
they're
the
all
other
gonna
side.
sell our properties because I don't want to come to the beach anymore because those
Oh, yeah.
turbines are going to be out there.
Oh, yeah.
And so hopefully somebody else from the
On the other
University of
side.
Delaware will come.
Yeah.
But and Orsted, I'm sure you can call them up right now. They could probably give you a number of professionals that say, this is the best thing going.
Sure.
But until all that information comes and is put on the table in front of everybody, it's going to be very difficult.
I would like to say a couple of things. The Delaware Nature Society has been approached by Orsted. They have a lobbyist here in Delaware that is actually on one of our committees. My understanding is that this project is going to happen. They still have a number of hurdles regulatorily to get through, but people in Delaware don't really have any say in whether it's going to happen. And the only issue on the table for us in Denrec is where the location of the transmission line. And so, in my opinion, and I'm very much in favor of clean energy and concerned with climate change. But I feel that Ørsted, and they're a for-profit company, and this is their easiest, lowest hanging fruit, is to put this transmission line through the state park. It's the easiest, cheapest option. And they've been a little heavy-handed with people not, and Denrec's been a little stupid the way they've handled it without transparency, and then just saying on their survey, what improvements would you like to see at Fenwick Island, without explaining to people what they're really doing. So people in the Nature Society who are asked to jump in with this thing have taken this position, which is, you need to give us a lot more information about what you're doing in the state park before we're going to say, yes, we're with you. So, there's a lot of issues. It's not just wind power in general and whether we like it or not. I think if you have a company that's making a lot of money, and they're obviously in it for money, and they're just trying to pick the easiest way to do it and the most profitable way to do it, they can still do it. Even if they can't go through Fenwick Island, they can figure out another way. And so I think we should hold the Ørsted accountable for what they're doing. Yes, we are going to have, I guess we are going to have a wind farm. That's pretty much, unless they can't meet the federal standards. I think it's not the state of Delaware that gets to decide that question, but they have the lease. They have to go through some further permitting on the federal level. Nothing with Delaware. Nobody in Delaware can stop this wind farm just through the state. I know in Maryland, their federal congressperson stopped it from coming off of Maryland. None of our congressional constituency, Carper or Coons or any of them, have opposed this thing on the federal level. And so that would have been probably the last point at which Delaware could have gotten them to stop it. They have not. But I do think that, I don't like it that this for-profit company can, sort of create this narrative that if you at all question what they're doing, then you're against clean energy and you're against wind, just by asking, or saying, this is a beautiful state park. Do we really need to put a transmission thing in here? Why can't we put it somewhere else? So, I don't know. But I just factually, I think people are getting confused. They think they're going to stop the wind farm, and they're not. But so I just wanted to clear that one fact. Yeah.
Mary, where they're putting the wind farm is in federal property.
Yeah.
So really the states have nothing to do with it. Maybe down in Maryland when they were going to put it inside Maryland.
Well, no, it was still in federal waters, but the federal congressman can that's a federal elected official, but he's from Maryland, and his constituents didn't want it, and he didn't want it, so they, on the federal level, and also from what I understand from a scientific point of view, the wind is very good in Delaware, and there's a lot of other reasons why they want it where they want it, but
maybe again, what we need is somebody that can explain this to the general population that's so uptight about it. It's like, oh, this is coming from Maryland.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't get any choice
I
because
know.
it's from Maryland, and yet it is a federal thing. And I mean, I didn't have that understanding, and certainly people walking out on the street don't.
No.
It's like if in the paper it said, if you object to this, then, you almost get the feeling that it's dead in the water if you object to it. But
yeah, no,
but
I
what
don't
you're
think
saying
so.
is no, it is coming, and so maybe what we need is more of an understanding of the whole process.
And from what I understand, there's
Yeah.
going to be a second one coming off of Rehoboth.
Yeah.
They have a federal lease, but
Mayor Coons, did I see your hand up there for a further explanation?
Yeah, she's absolutely right. In the same as the gentleman pointed out, these are federal waters.
Mary and Kevin.
Yes, federal waters, and the leases are out there. They're out there right now, someplace between 13 miles, the closest, and 19 miles. It's configured like a triangle, and actually there's two of them. One right off here, one right off Maryland. And Orsted has a portion of the one straight off here. And the big thing that Orsted is saying is the cheapest way to land is straight. And if we run a wire, which is probably that big, it's not as big as some people were saying it's like 3 or 4 feet. But
8 feet, I heard 8 feet at one point.
And I think it's approximately $800,000 a mile just for the wire. And the easiest place is Fenwick Island. And so,
Straight shot.
really the only thing, and she's absolutely right, that Delaware has a say in today is if the wire goes to Delaware. I mean, basically, I think the state could say, not a shot, and then they have to find someplace else to go. But she's absolutely right that this stuff is gonna happen at some point in time in the future, whether you like it or not. And it just depends on where the power goes. And I think, if Delaware were to say no on the landing for the wire, I think Maryland would have to figure something out in order to do it. But it'd probably be much more expensive because it's 20 miles down the road. There are fields like this up and down the East Coast. There's a lot of them as you go up around Long Island as well. And this is just one of the ones that's,
New Jersey's doing it as well.
yeah.
There's a big one coming,
And so,
Atlantic City.
but again, it's the information flow that's not there, whether it's from the corporate side or the federal side. The federal government put these leases out there, and again, some people in Washington are not fighting because people want whatever, but the people on the ground need more information, and that's what's going on in Delaware.
Is that what you meant by fields, is the various places that the federal government's put out the leases?
Yeah, and there's only, I don't know exactly what these fields are. They're like 20 miles wide or something like that.
There's a map in the little letter.
Yeah. And I think you can put out in that triangle, I don't know if it's 100 fans, and I think the initial one is for like 15. And I think it's maybe a half a mile between propellers.
And that's just one of the fields.
Yeah.
And I think that if you look at some national water, I don't know what it's called, these Clyde cluster novels, but there are these fields up and down, and they have maps in the federal government of where the fields are.
That's so helpful. All that information is great. What would you say is there one place, a website, something you can go to so that we can stay up to date on this and know when these meetings are happening at the high school and stuff like that? Is there any type of...
The Delaware meetings?
Well, just to stay up to speed, I don't even know.
Well,
This letter I got was the first I've heard about it.
And
So.
that's from
I don't know that they have a specific meeting set up between now and January 15th. What they've done is they've kept up, the discussion period. So you can write to Senator Hocker in Dover about it. The Indian River thing, I think, was called by Senator Hocker and some other people. And again, it wasn't a great situation for, depending on which side you were on. And it was just a scream fest. And I don't know that there was enough information given out. It'll take so long to get the information.
I think that was one of the criticisms that people are upset that there hasn't been enough information about. I mean, things have changed over time. When Blue Water first was proposing, what they were proposing looks a lot different than what's on the table now.
technology's changed.
A lot of people don't even realize that. And so, for example, the trend is now to make them much taller. And so a lot of people will say this, they're just going to be specks on the horizon. No, it's going to be like the New York City skyline when you're on the New Jersey Turnpike. I mean, you will see them. So, just facts. We should be straightforward, honest with people what's happening, and not like people say, people are opposed to little specks on the horizon, well, that's not factually correct. So the facts people should just be more transparent. The state has been, Secretary Garvin has, I think he's so eager to get the money that I just politically, I don't understand why someone who's a political appointee would handle it the way he has, because a lot of the anger around it is the fact that they didn't disclose a lot of the information. And now all of a sudden, this group, which it's ironic because they're not an environmental group, the Caesar Rodney Institute, their thing is anything that interferes with oil and gas profits, they're opposed to. Okay, so they're the ones that are finally notifying the public, so it's very ironic. Oh, guess what? A lease was signed for 800-foot towers, which, and even the position that I am, I didn't know it until about October that it actually was happening. I thought it was still somewhere out there. And so it just hasn't been a good public relations, it's a fiasco from a public relations standpoint. And you'd think with all the money that's involved that there would be some better thinkers about how to present it and make sure that people understand it. And, you know, because it's a big deal, you know, it's a very big deal to do this. You know, it's at first of its the biggest one that, you know, these towers are way bigger than anything in the world apparently. And to just kind of blindside people with it it's not smart. If your goal is to get it through, could have been handled much better, in my opinion.
Myra, you should know that this is not the first the first rodeo that these folks have been involved in. This issue, this proposal, this lease has been going on for years.
Yeah,
we had a hearing down in Ocean City that I attended, where the mayor of Ocean City got up and said how horrible they're going to look and it's going to
that was
ruin
Blue
property
Water,
values.
right? Or was that Orsted?
I think it was at that time Blue Water.
Yeah,
it wasn't Orsted yet. But I was there and I provided testimony too about how, yes, there's going to be visibility out there. And they had a big artist rendering or graphic of how big it would look if you held a dime at the end of your hand like this. That's about how much you're going to see. So it's not like they were trying to deny.
Well, that was the old,
that you're going to be able to see it.
Even with the new
Right.
ones.
And now at this most recent hearing in Dagsboro, they brought out a revised rendering of what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
So they were being, in my opinion, as open and out front as they could be. I mean, they had spokespeople there to explain in great detail about how, you know, it's not like they've been cooking this up and hiding it from people all along. It's been discussed several times.
Well, you know,
and this was another opportunity to provide additional information about a more refined proposal, and they're seeking people's input on the proposal.
Yeah.
It's not
Are you talking about the one that
anything.
was just at Indian River last week?
At Dagsboro, yeah.
Yeah, because that was sort of like after the fact, and then people were sort of outraged. They brought them out to Indian River to explain it. So.
Well, people have been outraged down in.
I mean, I know there are people that they don't want it, and a lot of people don't want it.
Yeah.
But we didn't know where it was. What I'm saying is, the Blue Water thing kind of died for a variety of reasons, and then
it's the same lease area, and so the same.
yeah. So we knew there was this lease, and we kind of knew it was out there.
Yeah.
And then in about October, I guess the news media reported that there was a new company, a new proposal, and not only that, that the secretary had a memorandum of understanding and was good to go, and so there was nothing, no sort of run up to it the way there was with the Blue Water, where they had a lot of, you know, the workshops and the information sessions, and so. I don't know, they don't have to do that, but it would have been better. I think it would have been better even to the Fenwick Island thing. Nobody knew that was coming until it was the memorandum of understanding had been signed months before, but they didn't inform the public. So now, and a lot of people are upset about that as a whole separate issue, and some of these older guys that are on the committee of the Nature Society, who are science-based people, their assessment of it is that Orsted should spend more money and stay out of the state park. And we're getting pretty close to take that position.
Well, there are a variety of opinions. I
Yeah.
can imagine around this table, we could keep
Yeah.
going for quite a while.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah,
only
sorry I
gotten-
brought it up.
We've only gotten to Nettie so far. So I wonder if we could continue that part of the conversation. to
So
one
maybe
hour.
what we say from that whole conversation.
I just, when I
is
heard things
as-
that seemed inaccurate, I
Yeah,
just
no, that was
felt
really
like I had to
educational.
say it.
That was very helpful.
Dick Byrne.
Yeah, if I could just add briefly to what the mayor shared about recycling, and just to let this committee know that Charlie and I have also been involved in meetings with other city officials, the city manager and the director of public works on the recycling. So it's not just the one committee that's dealing with it.
Great.
We're doing that to kind of integrate some of these issues across the pertinent committees. So Charlie, as the chair here, has been involved in that.
Great.
I'm proud to be a player at
In
the
that
table.
discussion, and we'll continue to do it that way as best we can.
Good.
And it may end up, eventually being moved to this committee.
Doesn't make any difference as long as it's done.
Yes, as long as it's done, and that's the key,
Right.
that we're working, and if we can have team effort across city committees, I think so much the better. The other thing to clarify is that there is recycling taking place out in all the city parks, thanks to Evan giving a really nice grant earlier in the year, the Big Belly.
Yeah, very
If
nice,
you've seen
very nice.
those
Solar powered trash.
Solar
cans.
powered trash and side-by-side trash and recycling. So those are sitting in
Yeah,
all
and
of our
I've
city
noticed that.
parks.
It's fantastic.
Haven't run any cables through the park to get to that part. So why don't we continue? with
Okay,
Catherine?
what I'd like to say, and just in my feelings about that conversation is that as a committee, that conversation about the wind farm, maybe as a committee, we commit to the value of transparency, that's really important. And I'm new to full-time Rehoboth Beach, but I've known about these wind farms for a long time. So there has been information out there, maybe just hard for some people to find. I mean, the Cape Gazette's been covering it really a lot. So as a committee, we commit to transparency, because I do think that's a big problem in our federal government too. Okay, so just to talk about my loves or my hopes about the committee is invasive species. I think that's very important. If we're, I think of our role as being sort of very holistic. And when you think about the whole environment as a whole, what we choose to plant in our gardens, on our streets, that talk from, what's his name, was just so fabulous. What was his? Ptolemy, and I'm sorry.
You should get his book, it's
Yeah.
Bringing Nature Home.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just fabulous. It just brought it so home, so to home. And I thought about you, Susan, when you talked about your bird feeders, and you said bird feeders are wonderful, but the little babies need the caterpillars, and that's why we need the native species. And I thought, oh my goodness, it was fabulous. So that's a really big, important issue
If
to
you
me.
wanted to see his speech again, it's already been recorded when he gave it here in this room.
Yeah.
And so it should be on the civic web available to look at.
And he's such a delightful speaker. He speaks with so much enthusiasm and happiness, and although that's a big deal, we're losing a lot of birds. The other thing for me that's really important is energy audits. When I first got here and did some modifications to my house and found out I could not get anything solar because I'm too close to the woods, my contractors suggested an energy audit, and it really was wonderful. They came and, I was in a position where I was doing some remodeling, so a lot of things could be done with insulation. I was creating a room that used to be a screened-in porch, making it a 4-season porch. So that was really helpful to have that. And I have chosen to have all of my energy provided through a clean choice company. So I pay for all renewables. And it's a little more expensive than it would be if I hadn't done that. I'm willing to do that. But the amount of energy that I use is less. It's a little more expensive, but it's less. So I think that's really important because a lot of, although we should have, I kind of am surprised at the lack of solar here. I'm surprised at how few houses, buildings, the church, that we didn't put solar on the church. I'm surprised that that we don't have more solar.
It's heaven sent, why shouldn't
I
children?
know.
Yes.
So, and I don't know, I was married to a man that always told me it was always about money. And I always said, no, it's about love and compassion. He said, oh, honey, you're going to find that. And he's true. So what that whole dynamic financially was, who knows? But our educating people about how you can do these energy audits at your homes or at your restaurants, whatever is important. And then I also chose, because my flood insurance was going to go up to $13,000 a year, to have my house raised up. Now, I was lucky. I sold a house in Pittsburgh. I made some money. So not everybody, it cost me $32,000 just to lift it. And then to
$3,200 to lift it?
Yeah, $32,000 just to lift it. And my house is little. My house is not even as big as this room.
Where is it for that? you
It's
have
near the
flooding?
wastewater treatment facility. It's
Oh.
in that community back there. But that is a floodplain that was
Yeah.
filled in when they dug the canal. So I think that those issues around stormwater, flood water, what the effects of, they're so big that I don't know, that's where we start. Maybe we start with small issues and get our feet on the ground, who knows? But those are really important. We had that, that king tide a couple of months ago, and a fellow who's looking to buy some property across the street from me came to see if it flooded, because the other property he's looking at in Dewey had flooded. And it wasn't, we had the storm, Dorian was off the coast, but water's gonna be a big issue. And the fellow at the Rascals said, he said it's not seawater so much that we're going to be worried about. It's freshwater that's getting pushed up. And I don't really remember that much about that, but I know that you and Ted were like, whoa, this is big. So anyway, those are my issues. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Catherine.
Okay, I guess the way I was thinking about what this committee could do is that we should start with the low-hanging fruit and
Right.
see just ways that our city can do things better without too much effort, and I'm sure there's plenty. And so one of the things I thought of also, which other people mentioned, the plants and native plants, and the city itself has a lot of landscaping that it does and planting that it does, and so it's not going to be more expensive to choose native over ornamentals or whatever. So I think that we should, I think as a committee, we could kind of try to review a lot of the city's practices and make some recommendations how to do them better in terms of, especially around landscaping and, and there's some other things with the recycling and the tree canopy that are already being worked at, but I think we should try and get an understanding of what those other committees are doing. And that was a
Can I
big.
just say something about the native
Yeah.
planting? Actually, it is a little more expensive.
Is it?
Yeah, and part of the
I
reason
didn't find that when I was doing my own. But.
Maybe I didn't know who to buy
Yeah.
from. Now I'm much
Yeah.
better at knowing who to buy from. But there are few landscaping companies that know a lot about.
Yeah.
So that might be one thing we can do is help to educate more. I know there's a big plant, the Inland Bays group. Is
Yes,
that?
yeah, they're involved in that issue,
Yeah,
and
so-
the Botanic Gardens
Nice.
are
Okay,
involved.
so
And the
maybe we
Nature
can
Society
educate.
has a big, at least up north, they have a big sale every year
Right.
where you can go in the spring and buy a lot of native plants. So even if they are a little more, at least you feel like, well,
Right.
The Nature Society gets the money. But
And we could help by educating
But
folks
yeah,
about that.
we could, but the city, and again, not knowing their budget and what they're doing, but I think they definitely, the city of Newark, they passed an ordinance that says they will only plant native plants on any county, the county of Newcastle, on county property. They actually have it as a law.
Nice.
And I think we could look into recommending such an ordinance My second thing is that there's a lot of new construction in town with, including myself, where there's an opportunity to educate people how to do things the best way. And I found that when I was trying to figure these issues out, it's not easy. There's not one, I know I've heard there's like green building initiative and different things, but there's really not an easy way for a person to figure out what's the best approach when you're doing something like this to have sustainable materials or, you know, and so all those other issues, drainage, et cetera, energy efficiency. And I wondered if we could put together some kind of clearinghouse, general information, when people come in, get the building permits, consider these things, you know, maybe you should look at this. And if it's not, and again, as you say, money is always a consideration for people, but there may be things that if it's between two, one's better environmentally, they would pick that one. And maybe it could even be incentivized by our building department in some way that people could get some discount in their permitting fees or whatever if they did certain things. You know, like for example, porous paving materials. You know, people put driveways in, you know, and they don't think about that. I don't know why they don't think about that, but because I don't know how hard that would be. Or lawns, you know, lawns, in my opinion, do not belong, you know, at the beach at all. And that gets to your issue, you know, they require chemicals to maintain and water. And so if you kind of said, if you design your landscaping where you don't have a lawn and you're doing it this way, then maybe you can incentivize that. So those are my two things, how to encourage homeowners to do best practices and also the city to do best practices. And it's a variety of things, stormwater, plants, all these things. And they shouldn't be as difficult. You know, I think a lot of it is education. So, I mean, even hearing people say at this table, wow, Doug Ptolemy, like it's something new. And these ideas are not new. And even people here that are interested in the environment are talking as if they had just learned these things recently. So I think a lot of other people don't know and could, I don't know. I mean, his book has been around for 20 years, but if the city, now that we have a committee, we got involved in when someone comes in for a building permit, here's what you should know and here's what we can do. And I know that would have been helpful to me if it had been there, but something we could do.
Thank you, Gary.
Can I just comment very briefly on
Yes,
that?
please. Go ahead, Dick.
Really good ideas, and it is education to a large extent, but there is some important legislation, and the commissioners and mayor have just very recently been working with other city staff and are in the process of approving a much more stringent stormwater kinds of strategies. Yep, thank you.
Sorry for finishing your sentences.
At construction sites.
Yeah.
Because that's been one of the real problems in terms of runoff into our freshwater lanes. And so.
That was approved, I guess,
Yes.
recently.
Yeah, and so that, is going into effect as we sit here. And builders and contractors are learning, and so it's an education for them, but there will be penalties if the new rules are not followed.
So this is an enforceable provision.
So some things
There will be blood. No, there will be fines.
So very, very good ideas.
Thank you, Dick. Nettie?
Janet?
Janet, excuse me.
That's Nettie.
Wrong friend.
I've been working with the public a lot and trying to change perceptions on things. And one thing that has hit me over and over is human nature resists change. And it's hard. If you've done it all your life a certain way, I think that's what we're fighting a lot, is just change. But change is necessary, and we all know that sitting here. We can't keep doing the things like we used to do and expect a different result. That is not going to happen. So for me, the education is a huge part, including people in the discussion, informing them of the options, of what they need, what needs to be done to make this change that we need for our Earth. I mentioned before the restaurants, because I don't eat out often. I'm vegan, so I don't really eat out terribly much, but when I do, and I'm aware of the places that have the environmentally friendly things, but one of the places that I frequent occasionally is, I'm not going to say the name of it, but anyway, in the beginning of the summer, they had the straws only by request, and I applauded them for that. I said, that's fantastic. A month or two later, I come back, and I have a straw in my cup, and I said, hold on, I thought it was straws only by request. And he said, no, the public, our customers were really started to complain, so now it's straws, no straws, only by request. And I said, but what? Okay. So we had a small discussion, but we're losing sight here. Yes, people are resisting change, but that doesn't mean we don't move forward. You keep going. You had the right idea. Now you backtracked, and now I have to remember to ask them every time I come, no straws, please. I think the restaurants, we have a lot in our town. I think that there are good options, as seen by the green drink presentation that we had a couple months ago. And I think, Nettie, you were talking about that too. Education, just showing them changes, differences, how you could do things differently. And again, most places that I have talked to, they feel that if customers, they will resist it. Well, that's human nature. Yes, you'll have some, but once you start this, I think you'll get more people on board and seeing why we're doing what we're doing. So for me, number one, I think would be that, just trying to inform restaurants of better choices that they could make. Also, it's really good if we can have some kind of incentive, like was mentioned too, for the teacher in me. Mm-hmm. We have to give something. I don't know what that could be, whether we get they get a sticker or that a boy or that a girl or whatever, something, and just show, because Rehoboth is and should be leading this for being green. We are such a great place, and this is what drew me back here to want to retire here, and which we did. So the second thing for me, I think, would be the compostable things. We need a compost facility.
Yes.
Compost is a much better way to go, but in our own backyards is not the answer, because it doesn't get hot enough, from what I understand. So one for the town of Rehoboth, the city of Rehoboth, something that when we go to the restaurants and say these compostable things are a great option in lieu of plastic and styrofoam, well, they have to put up. Where would we suggest then they put these containers if we had a compost facility? I think that would be the way to go.
We could also compost leaves and garden waste
yard
and
waste,
stuff, and
big
maybe
time.
make some money off of it.
Big time.
You have
Well,
to-
we do have yard waste.
scratch.
Yeah.
Yeah, where does it go though?
Yeah, where does it go?
Yeah, good question.
We should inquire with Kevin Williams, our division.
Well, anyway.
Pittsburgh made a lot of money off of that, and then
But-
sold
they
it.
made money off of
Mhm,
that? Wow,
mhm.
yeah.
I just bought
You
some
could go
Leaf
and get your
Pro mulch
compost.
from Montgomery County, Maryland, to put on my gardens.
That was
Wonderful soil.
composted, right? So
Well, as I said, resistance to change is one of them, and just because we find problems with the new things that are coming, many new things come to me because I'm working with people and their ideas and things. And just because they might have a few flaws doesn't mean we throw the whole thing out. We fix it. We figure out, okay, well, good point, that, it's not doing quite what we wanted to do. We'll figure out a way to work with it, not start all over again. So that's me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janet.
Well, a lot of it's already been lifted up, but I think for me, the two things I'm especially is working with the business community partnerships. That's real important. Well, it's restaurants too, the whole business community. And see how we can be in it together and have a sense of pride and all that. And the other areas, the whole area of plantings, yards, caterpillars as well as birds, all of that. My two areas.
That's a nice, that's like a low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
To start with that, or, one of the things.
We're talking a lot about education, aren't we?
We are.
Happens to be a common theme, yep.
To Janet's point, suppose we had 24, as opposed to 24 recycling cans, suppose we had 24 water refill stations.
Yes.
That was on my list. Yeah.
Suppose, now this is what SFO Airport, San Francisco Airport did years and years ago. I was living there when that happened. And when California eliminated plastic bags, they eliminated, going through. They're tough to do. Change is tough in the beginning.
In the beginning,
But it was
right.
so healthy for the environment. It was healthy. It was quicker getting through TSA because you didn't have water bottles. You bring your empty container through, and then you get water, and then you see how many bottles you're saving. Now you have an education component going along with giving them water.
Right.
To the point of water, as a health coach, I do a lot of stuff in the workshops that I do here in the state of Delaware. We're trying to eliminate heavy metals and chlorine in the water. It is a huge health issue to our thyroid, to hormones, all these other things.
Sure.
Suppose, and I don't know if your water filter at Epworth has a
Okay.
filter on it.
Yes, it
But-
does.
Okay. Suppose we had all these, now you have an education component as well as a useful component. You're teaching, you have, I don't know, 400,000 or 500,000 people coming here who don't live here. But they will learn that, guess what? Oh, Rehoboth is a really green city. We're coming back here next year.
Yep.
So suppose you do that and do that kind of thing. And you're now filtering the water, so now you're helping the health component. And you're putting stuff on these devices that teach them why we're doing this.
Great.
Suppose you
Good idea.
suppose you deleted plastic bottles instead of recycling. Suppose we delete, because the plastic is the BPH in plastic is cycling through. There are scientific studies, you can dispute them and stuff. I am not a scientist. Look at the rise in autism. Look at the rise in cancer. It's personal to me. I work with autism groups and have had in the past in Maryland. Suppose there was no plastic bottles available in Rehoboth Beach. Suppose it was all glass and aluminum, which are very easily recyclable.
Yes.
Change the way we look at the prism a little bit instead of working on
Right.
spending all this money, time, education, recycling. And I defy anybody to try to figure out the recycling. I've looked at the paper from the Gazette. I have it pinned up on my wall. What do you recycle? What do you not? And how's a visitor going to find that?
We
And then you
talked
go to the
about that.
recycling center here in Rehoboth, because now I've lost my trash because I'm moving one Monday closer in. And they don't match what I was doing at home.
Oh, no. Oh,
How
no.
does that work? So we
It's very
probably
confusing.
don't have enough energy to even educate in the short run because it's so confusing. That's a long-term project. And when you look at the number of rooms and the number of people staying in those rooms over the summer and over a year, how many more people can we affect by having recyclable messages? And I think I passed a lot to some of you have seen the green program that was California was
Right.
working on.
Right.
So there's a green hotel motel program that they established. This handout I gave was back in 2007.
Wow.
So I don't know what they're doing now. And you look at the rooms we have here in this little tiny gorgeous town of Rehoboth, what can we do in terms of education? And also, what effect can we have on the business, helping them save money? They're stakeholders in this. Save money,
Sure.
but also make money. If they save money, I've been a business owner,
Yeah.
you make money, it can also. So
Makes sense.
our goal is to help them be profitable and be prosperous. And here again, then they can offer more amenities, more things like that.
Sure.
So the hotel motel green program, I think, would be an ideal thing. And you mentioned the restaurant you were,
Sure.
well, here's the education component of it. Because I was at a restaurant recently where they had the sign up, this is why we're not offering. You educate people of why we're doing it, and you don't take those signs down. You keep those things up there. You can pull these off of websites. But if every restaurant in town did this,
Yes.
and you keep seeing it over and over and over again, the first time you see it, you don't see it. As you all know, all the educators, the second time you kind of see it, but you don't really. The third time,
Takes a while.
oh, I guess we must be trying to get green here in Rehoboth.
Stuart, you were holding up something there that pertained to plastic straws?
Yes, this was the thing that came off their national website.
All right,
And I saw it, I happened to see it at a restaurant I was eating at, actually inland by a couple of
I'll
miles.
pass that around for folks.
And it was just, and I saw it and I said, what are you doing this for? And it was just really fascinating. Here again, an education to me. But suppose we don't have plastic bottles.
That'd be heaven.
If we didn't have plastic bottles, and suppose we didn't have plastic straws.
Yeah.
And suppose what would happen? The businesses could then make money by selling what Tim's doing at Rise Up. They can sell bamboo straws. They can sell stainless steel straws for the people that need them medically.
You know, another thing you could do is you could talk the businesses into having water bottles or somewhat inexpensively. And then they could even put their name, they can advertise, they put their, hopefully put their name on it and.
A number of
and just-
businesses, when you don't have plastic bottles, guess what? They're gonna start selling these.
Exactly,
When
and then
you
you have the
don't have-
water stations and that people can
When
then
you
take them.
don't have plastic bags, they're gonna be selling these, and they're gonna put their brand, and they're gonna make some money.
Exactly.
These.
And if plastic bags
I
stop,
made this out of t-shirt. Go ahead. T-shirt.
as we talked about a couple months ago, the ROFO out here just outside the gate of our city, the manager told me that they give away 6,000 plastic bags a week.
Oh my gosh.
And he says, we're one of the lowest, the ROFO, right, the new one,
Royal Farms.
6,000.
Royal
Royal
Farms
Farms.
I've never heard that before.
6,000 a week. Now, he was the manager of Long Neck, which is a older one and it's inland. He said 8,000 to 10,000 plastic bags a week. So then what happens when these things get all over the roads, which is what we're seeing now? And there was a farmer who just plowed under the right in front of Epworth, because I guess they're putting, do you see the plastic now, what they do? And the farmers, I've driven through the plastic heading to Maryland just last week, and they're all plowing their fields under. The plastic in the fields is devastating. It's one of the most heartbreaking things you can see. Well, they're plowing it into the soil. I don't know what's going on with that. That'd be interesting.
Wow.
The businesses, I feel, are stakeholders. And if we, being a former business person, and I'm a little health coaching thing, if we treat them as stakeholders and bring them in and find out what they want and what they need and offer them and work in partnership with them to help them make more money and to be more prosperous, then we're all in partnership and we're all in this together as a win-win situation. And to your point you were making, what we need when you see something in a restaurant once and then you don't see it again, what we need is critical mass. When you start doing water bottles all over, those water refill stations all over the boardwalk and inland things, yes, people will all of a sudden get it. You're starting critical mass. When you start packaging products without using plastic, and you teach them what you're doing and why you're doing. Long time ago, I was in California and I was at the farmer's market. And the farmers are fabulous at putting out the products. They don't know how to market. So when you go to them and teach them how to market and say, here's an okra. Well, what the heck do you do? And then you teach them and you put a sign on your product, or an eggplant that nobody knows how to cook, or a jicama. Here's the proteins and the nutrients in it. This is a great vegetable for diabetics and stuff like that. And here's how you prepare it.
Wonderful.
All of a sudden, you start selling that thing at a greater rate, and there are no plastic bags in those markets.
No.
There is no plastic in California. We can do this. We can be, in my opinion, at the cutting edge of change in the East Coast. This town has been written up by, I think it was Travel and Leisure magazine a few years ago, as the 4th cleanest beach. Suppose it was written up all the time and was regionally and nationally acclaimed, our businesses would prosper and really take off here. We wouldn't have the turnover that you see.
You should know that our farmers market here in Rehoboth Beach has also banned plastic bags, so we're good on that. just according to Commissioner Pacaluzzi, and Susan, you'll confirm that? You're connected with the farmer's market? I'm sorry, Stuart.
So yeah, so basically, and you know, some people have figured out how to get rid of trash and everything. Montgomery County, Maryland, of course, has got this incinerator that people come to look at from all over the world. But they're redoing theirs because it can't keep up with the massive human trash in Montgomery County is just a joke. But Singapore, the country of Singapore, has figured this out.
Years ago.
The
they
country
burned plastic.
does not export anything. It's a little island country. They burn all of their trash in the most worldwide state-of-the-art incinerator in the world. And the emission from it is cleaner than the air that it goes into. So it's clean, you can just breathe it right out of the stack. I heard rumors that it's around 2,000 degrees or something. So the technology already exists not to export or take our stuff to Pennsylvania or do whatever. Maybe we're too small a state. I have no idea, but that would be an interesting thing to learn long term. But just not to produce the trash in the first place. We have the ability not to produce the trash. We have the ability not to have plastic containers, because when you have plastic containers, and I'm going to use an example, I'm going to use body lotion. When you have body lotion, you also have fillers and you have preservatives, and that stuff is toxic to the skin. And the skin is the largest organ in the body, and when that goes into your body, that's no different than if you ate it. It is more bioavailable. If you have something that's packaged like this, there's no fillers. This is shampoo.
Right.
There are no fillers. And this was the packaging.
Our Annapolis,
This is the
Green Drinks
packaging.
had those.
This is the packaging that came in. So in other words, there's no packaging.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Think of the possibilities what we have to do. So my two things is the hotel motel green program and plastics in general. Delete these things off of out of Rehoboth Beach.
Yeah, you're right, deleting is a much better option.
You can do it one or two
So much
things at a
better.
time. And
Charlie, didn't your wife find some city in Rhode Island that has a plastic bottle and Nantucket maybe, or?
Yes.
Yeah, so that might be something to look at, how they did it.
so, and it can be done because, okay, years ago when there were no seatbelts in cars, I was a car dealer then. Nobody, even when they
They
put
weren't
them in.
even in the car?
No.
No.
I remember we had them, we didn't use them.
Then when they went in, nobody used them. Then when the law came out that you're gonna get a fine, but we'll waive it they still didn't use them. Then all of a sudden, there was a huge billboard campaign,
Beepers got
national
me.
public service announcements, and the fine got more stringent. All of a sudden, they used them. None of our kids will ever get in a car, I think.
No.
You don't ever see anybody, it took a couple generations. But the auto industry had to come along and it had to promote, and they had to put budgets towards PSA announcements and all that kind of stuff, but it worked. So it can work in this too, but we're pretty late in the ballgame. We are pretty late in the ballgame here, so
Sprint to the finish line.
yes.
Well, yes.
So those are mine.
Sprinting right into the finish line.
And by the way, I used to live right next to the Tesla factory in Fremont.
Oh, wonderful.
It's a spectacular factory.
Okay, I'm interested in plastics too. I do like the idea of putting water out on the boardwalk. I see two problems. It's engineering problems, just have to get around them. You gotta get the water there, so you can subsidize the businesses maybe to supply water for free. And you have to get the water cool. And might be able to use solar for that.
Sure.
It's a possibility.
You're talking about a refill station?
Refill, yeah.
There are
And
water
There is
fountains.
a water
There are
fountain.
water fountains on the boardwalk.
And you have showers.
It's not a
Okay,
refill
So
station.
water's not
It's
the
not-
water's there,
It's not a
yeah.
refill station for refilling.
but
no.
bottles.
You need about
but it's a-
120 of them to go up and down the boardwalk, so you may have to get other people involved.
Yeah.
So I'm just, I
I think
want to get rid of all plastics. Even single use, I get rid of it. Because this bottle, I got this
We can't
bottle,
catch up with it.
but I don't,
I agree. It's not.
I don't have a bottle at home because I get water at other places. I used to get it from hoses when I was a kid.
Yes, of course,
And it
we
was
drank
pretty
out of
easy.
those.
You could stop at anybody's house.
We did, we
You could stop
did.
at anybody's house and get water.
Sure, yeah.
The second thing is energy audits. I've had 2 energy audits so far, one in Waldwick, one here in Rehoboth. I think it's very important to get energy audits done. Because when you get the audit, they give you 20, 30 different things to do.
Mhm.
And over the years, you pick them off one at a time. And everybody gets involved with the energy audits. The energy audits, they cost some money. I don't know if the town can subsidize.
You can get them subsidized.
Yeah,
depending
they're
on
like
the offer you
$100,
make.
and then they want another $50 to check it again and stuff like that. But it does give you, you know, I found out when they did the test, they tested the leakage, and then they tested it a second time, and they said something's wrong. We have a big leak. I found out we had opened a window this much.
Right,
So,
right.
and the test could figure that out. Close the window, the problem went away. So I'm a big fan of energy audits and anything we can get to get everybody in the town. Anybody here have an energy audit done? No? Looks like almost all. So if you get that done, it goes a long way to teaching down the road.
Right.
Okay, those 2 things.
And what about solar? Or encourage solar in our city?
Well,
You're my solar guy.
They use a week,
That's all right.
Well,
a week.
I do encourage solar. My old village of Old Landing, I'm the research. I do the audits. And I pass everybody who has solar, because there's nothing in our write-ups that say you can't have solar. So
That's right.
it's really pretty easy. And every time I go to talk to somebody, I tell them to get solar. And I'm going to try to get solar in our clubhouse and in our church. We should definitely get
I
solar.
know.
Except we don't get subsidized because we don't make any money in the church.
Okay,
Big
well.
problem. Federal government now gives you 30%. I think they're going to cut to 20.
Next year.
But the reason they're cutting is because, you know, I looked at this 10 or 15 years ago, it was $60,000. And then 5 years ago, it was got down to 40,000. I put in it at 25,000. In a year and a half, it's down to 16,000. So the subsidies have had their effect.
And I think, Kevin, too, with this energy audits, I walk up and down Rehoboth Avenue in the summertime, and it's amazing to me how many businesses, restaurants have air conditioning going on out into the street, totally open doors. And that, to me, that blows my mind. That absolutely blows my mind. Talk about wasteful.
Well, they're doing it in order to get people to come into
I
their store.
know,
you
I know. Or you could just stand at the door and be air
They
conditioned.
would get- businesses
with
would
my dog.
definitely-
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Businesses would definitely get an energy audit because they want to save money.
Yeah.
And
Good point, because I know when I'm walking there and it's really hot, I stop at the doorway and go, "Ooh," and then I keep going. So yeah, there you are,
Just
air conditioning outside.
Rehoboth Avenue.
Absolutely.
and you can get air conditioners that the efficiencies of the heat pumps now. I had an efficiency of 10. Now I put in 20. And if you get the small units, they go up to 30, 35. So you can get pretty good energy efficiency now as time is marching on. So.
Well, I see as time is marching on, we're coming up to the 1 o'clock hour, so I will sprint to the finish line by saying, I'm a climate kind of guy. I'm in favor of renewable energy and electric cars and all those sorts of things. I would like to see that we eventually recommend to the city that we have a climate action plan. Lots of other cities, Aspen, Colorado, and other places already have one. We might be able to go through and just take what they've got and scratch out Aspen, Colorado,
Why not?
right in Rehoboth Beach with some other modifications that we think are important to do, and make a recommendation like that to our commissioners. I'd like to see it be the sort of thing that saves money for the city. I like the idea of having to go to the city commissioners and asking for them to fork over more money, especially since there are people who are sensitive to tax expenditures around this town and probably all across America. It's good for us to be able to show that you can save money with energy audits and save money by installing solar. I've frequently pointed out that the city of Ocean City, Maryland, which is sort of not on our side on the wind farms necessarily, or 30 miles off instead of 19 miles off, sure, so they can't see it. They had a engineer there who thought, well, why don't we team up with some other people to build a solar, to have them at their expense. The city didn't have to put any money up front. Build a solar farm over close to Berlin, Maryland, which is not too far away. And that they would get the energy from 25% of that farm for the city of Ocean City at a price that was less than what they were paying for standard offer service. So they saved $120,000 a year, every year for the next 20, 25 years, because they engaged in what's called a purchase power agreement. I would like to see if we can't scratch our heads, and maybe our electrical engineers and others can figure out how we get in on that. There are a number of news articles I've been reading in the papers, which of course I've put away in my nice little file on how other people have done that. It's not just somebody close to us, although it's often nice to say someone close to us did it as opposed to somebody in California did it, and they say, oh, forget it, California, it's no good. But there's possibilities of saving money for our city. I like that kind of an answer.
Well, that's a good segue for your next topic, which is grant monies. And I was telling you, Delmarva has announced a grant program for cities in Delaware for energy things.
Wow.
Solar in particular, they mentioned. And they're partnering with Delaware Nature Society. That's who you apply to. And so we were maybe, and I think they're going to do it on an annual basis, but for this year you have to apply by January. But if somebody came up with a solar project for the city, they might be able to get a grant from Delmarva.
That's great, since we have a grant writer in the room in the form of Evan, his ears are perking up over there as you speak, Mary.
Yeah.
Maybe you two can talk afterwards about what you need there.
Yeah, well, now that's been publicized a bit, it was the Cape Gazette just wrote a story about it too, this program, but, so Evan might know about it, but there are a lot of little opportunities that maybe we should try and look for various grants from state and federal for environmental, renewable, and sustainable stuff that therefore we can present to the city as they don't have to spend the money, we can get the grant.
Great. Grants, free money, I like that.
Yeah.
Well, let me see if we can move right along here with, there are probably lots of different kind of grant opportunities. We can do some more investigation in that. I listed here as an agenda item, possible future educational presentations, which might mean inviting in Kevin Williams, our Division of Public Works, to talk about things that are of interest to us, that he knows a lot more than we do to educate us. I'd mentioned also their hands-on projects to the extent that we might want to engage in activities like the Flip the Horseshoe Crabs to help our horseshoe crab population here. It's not necessarily simply in Rehoboth, but it's something that benefits the oceans generally, and since the ocean is a big part of what we are in Rehoboth, we might want to do that or some other things along that line. If we're doing something that's hands-on, I had a vision the other night of getting a costume that was like looking like an aluminum can with my head peeking out the top, or maybe my head peeking out through a hole in the side, and dancing around to encourage people to put your recycle in the new recycling bins we have on the beach. I don't know where they're going to put cops come and put the cuffs on me for
Don't you have a
disturbing
solar
the peace.
panel costume too?
Yeah, I have a solar panel costume as well.
Yes,
It's in parade with that.
Yes.
You know.
You might be doing that on your own.
Okay, moving right along. Let's discuss items for future agendas. Now, we could follow up on a lot of things we've been throwing out here today to see if we can sort of gel our thinking, to gel our subcommittees, like the Energy Audit Subcommittee. I have a feeling might have several people on it that might think of strategies for how we can encourage businesses and homeowners and churches and others to do energy audits and provide the information on how you can get an energy audit and how you can get maybe the grants or the discounts or the coupons or something to make it happen, and to form other sort of subcommittees to help work on other things, single-use plastics, and talk about, how cases of single-use plastic water bottles do we buy right in this building for use by our staff? And maybe we can help to educate them in a gentle sort of way rather than trying to ram it down their throats. But
It seems like a lot of a few common things have come up from many people
common
that you can
themes,
kind of
yeah.
agree on easily.
I would think so as well.
Yeah.
So maybe we could have those further, our next meeting, further coming together on the project ideas that we have.
So bring project ideas more, or just, where do you want me to put the notes there, young man?
Well, I guess I wasn't clear enough. Further refinement, I guess,
Okay.
of our thinking and team building, so that we
Okay.
can assign people to be on that team. Doesn't mean you can't join the team if you weren't on the original assignment, you know, it could be flexible and flowing back and forth from one team.
Like work groups.
Work groups,
Work
whatever
groups,
we
I
like to
like
call
that
them.
word. Subcommittees is more committees.
I think
Yeah.
it's a really good idea to have Kevin Williams come in and answer any questions we have about how things are already being done with the, you know, the use of chemicals or the landscaping or how they budget,
That would be huge.
you know, and just, you know, and
I'd like to know too.
yeah, so if we wanted to make, you know, some recommendations, it would be good to start off knowing what the baseline is.
And his title is?
He
Director of Department of
Director of Public Works.
yeah, so he's in charge of all that kind of stuff in the
Yes.
city,
He's
yeah.
in charge of all that, yeah.
And even things, you know, waste, disposal, sewage, all
So
that.
you may want someone from the inspector's office, you know, to come in and you can kind of do a tag team presentation,
Right.
Q&A with.
I'll ask our city manager if she'd like to be willing to have Kevin and or somebody else appear that she finds to be the right person. I think that's the general way we do things around here.
Yeah,
We don't just start assigning work to staff, city staff, we go through the proper
yeah, I wouldn't
channel.
think so.
So the city manager, Sharon Lynn, knows how to deploy her staff
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah, but it would be really helpful to us to hear from the staff how things are already being done.
Good, well, let me follow up on that if I may volunteer for that sort of thing. Let's see, future agendas, committee member comments. Here's the opportunity for anybody to have a chance to say something they forgot about saying earlier or wanted to have as, you're being kind to me because it's almost 1 o'clock, aren't you? I can tell. Very good. Setting of the next date and the time, seems to me we ought to have a regular meeting once a month.
I
And it's like the last Tuesday or the last Monday or the third or whatever fits our schedules. So do you have calendars with you?
We're on the first Friday?
First Friday?
We're on the second Friday, aren't we? No, first Friday.
Well, just because we're meeting now doesn't mean that we have to meet at this same first part of the month or something. If we found that that doesn't work for people who are maybe out of town, but
At Thursday.
First
Fridays are better for me.
Fridays are good with
Okay.
me, too. Fridays are good.
Yeah, we're on the first Friday.
The second Friday.
How about the 10th? Yeah.
well, does the first Friday or the second Friday work better for anybody?
Second Friday.
I think the second Friday, people-
Tied up in the morning and afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Ann, for that.
That's
So
good
this
to
room
know.
is being occupied by other people.
The screen.
Is the first Friday something that's available for this room for us?
Yeah, I have nothing scheduled for the first Friday.
First Friday of each month?
January 3rd.
January 3rd would be our next meeting.
Okay.
Is this 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock or anything better?
Eleven's good.
Which would you say? was
Oh,
better?
11's good. Like
11's
like
good,
we
just
did
like
it,
today?
yeah.
Okay, January 3rd at 11 o'clock will be our next meeting, and hopefully thereafter, the first Friday of each month. Is that also okay, Ann, to set that up that way? Great.
That was easy.
We're doing great.
Now, where did this report on
The
recycling?
jobs report,
I
yeah.
don't know where-
I
Oh,
think
look
it
at the
was
date.
Charles.
Today.
Is that
It was
yours?
Charles,
Yeah, that is mine, but
I know, and since you brought it up, I emailed it to you, so,
this,
yes.
yes.
I'd like to read that at my leisure if I could get time read.
I'd rather
really
use
is
the
a
hard
passport.
copy, but Dick will send me the electric copy and I'll send it around to everybody.
Sitting here.
I'm sorry.
I sent it earlier since
Oh,
we've been.
So it's already in my computer right now.
Is it like a link
Is it
online?
our
So you are welcome to share it.
I will. I'll send it around to everybody, the electronic copy of that report on recycling.
It's not that new, but it's probably the latest that you have.
Right.
Yeah.
It was the last time the recycling was done on Boardwalk and Beach in like 0203. And grant money, state grant money funded that effort. And this is an evaluation evaluation of what happened over those couple of seasons. Basically,
Yeah.
it was abandoned because so much of the recycled materials were contaminated. And therefore
That's-
they
yeah.
ended up having to go into the garbage. But, they were pretty big barrels, they weren't like we're talking about now, that will be like bottles and cans only. So people show food contaminated, pizza boxes, et cetera.
And that's the reason I'm told a lot of times that they don't even bother anymore because it's always contaminated, so why bother? But again, that doesn't mean that what we're trying to do is not, it's still that we need to do it, just find a better way, a different way.
Learn from the
And there's
lessons.
education in it. even though
Yes,
it's-
there is.
Stuart was talking about, that is how we get away from.
We have
Right.
a pizza box refund. In other words, if you return your pizza box, you get $1. It comes on the box. So you can return it.
Really?
Because I think the pizza boxes are probably what's filling up our garbage cans. A high
And-
percentage.
Yeah, and cardboard, I was just, this Google thing
And then it
that
would
I
be
looked
the-
at, it disintegrates in like 2 to 3 weeks in a
Yeah,
landfill.
But it would be the people who are
Yeah.
selling the pizzas who are getting them back.
Responsible.
So
for
every
what
time I
they
go to
say.
Nicoboli Pizza, I could bring my old pizza box back in with me.
Sure.
And
Like a-
I wouldn't,
But
I'd
you
get
would
$1
have-
off. or
You'd have to
something,
get them
50
to
cents.
agree,
Well, of course.
or we'd have to mandate it that they had to do it.
Start off voluntary and see if anybody wants to
That
bite.
doesn't help the
What's
visitors
the
who
bite?
come.
No.
We'll probably find out that there's all kinds of,
Turn
like,
it back in.
health
It might if the
regulations and
visitors
things
become
they can't
very
do it. but-
attentive to
I don't
recycling.
think if there's a monetary.
Might be a problem.
True enough.
Bears looking into, Kevin.
$1, it's gotta be $1. It's 50 cents.
Incentive.
Well, we'll look for you to maybe follow up with somebody like one of the pizza shops.
Pizza place.
See what they say. Next is citizen comments, and we have citizens in the audience like yourself. Evan, you got any comments you wanna share with us?
Sure, just one comment I'd like to share. So 2 things that we're talking about today. One would be grants. Just one comment. So 2 of the things that were talked about today, one was grants. The second was the growth that we're seeing in impervious surface coverage within town, whether it's development or redevelopment. So I know, Charlie, you and I had talked about the Resilient Communities Partnership Grant, which we currently have right now. The city of Rehoboth Beach took the lead on that partnership. We're actually working with all 7 coastal communities in Sussex County on this grant. We're wrapping it up. It's actually going to end December 31st. So I'd be happy to come in and do a presentation on that project.
We can have you talk on January 3rd, if that's acceptable to
Sure.
the city manager.
Great.
And anybody who was at the Rascal Summit and hung around long enough, I
Yes.
gave a presentation on that project there. So it would essentially be the
What
same
did the
presentation.
Resilient Communities what?
Resilient Communities Partnership.
Partnership. Thank you. I
That's
wish I
through
knew
DENREC's
short.
Delaware Coastal Programs Office.
That Rascal conference was very good.
Catherine, did I see you raise your hand there for a second?
I did, but I wanted to wait. I just have some questions about the secretary position.
Dick, you have another comment?
Yeah, Dick Byrne, Commissioner. I am not here as a citizen per se, but with my commissioner hat on. But let me just say, as you're wrapping up, Charlie, and all of you, how excited I am, and many of my fellow commissioners, I hope all of them are, that you are up and going, and this is a reality in our city. Now, a very quick story that a couple of you have heard, and that is last winter I was sitting by the pool in Key West, Florida, and my phone rings, and whenever it's a 302 number, I pick it up because I figure it's a constituent with something important to share. And it was Nettie Green. She introduced herself, said she received my number from
Yeah, this direct.
from Murray at Camp Rehoboth, and she wanted to talk about what we're doing and or not doing in the environment. And long story short, I said, let's get together in early April as soon as I get back. And we had coffee, and we started Rehoboth Green Team, and several of you participated with that. And that led to then a formal proposal that we worked together to draw up, and that came to the mayor and the commissioners to form this new committee. Our greatest asset in all of our coastal communities, but particularly the one I care about, the city of Rehoboth Beach, are our natural resources, our freshwater lakes, our beach, our parks, our urban forest, and so on.
Our people.
And so it does seem very critical that this committee, figures out how to begin to work. Can only do one thing at a time, obviously, but that you take on some of these important kinds of things that you've been talking about this morning. So thank you all as volunteers for putting in time, energy, and everything else that you're going to do in the future. I look forward to it.
You're putting a lump in my throat there,
Thank
Dick. Well, may I double down on that by saying thank you all so much. It's a wonderful group. We had a great time today, at least I did. And if I have tried to inject too much humor into the process, I'm sorry, I can't help myself. You can always give me free feedback, positive or negative. At some other time, you've got my email. Contact me anytime. I think we are done. Any last comments or thoughts before we adjourn?
Just a question. Obviously, I'm going to be in touch with you about this. Are you Miss Martin, and who are, do I send?
Ann Womack.
Womack, I'm terrible with names. Do you need me to, two questions. Can you send me the agenda in a format where I can type into it? I tried to do, I was planning on being the secretary, so I tried to.
I generate the agendas.
She generates this agenda here. That's-
Yeah, so what would be helpful as a secretary is if I could get into this form and then just type underneath it when I do the minutes. Following me?
Does that make sense? Is
Is
that
that
what other
possible?
committees do? Or they just,
You have a handbook.
yes, we do, right here.
Okay.
We got it.
I tried to do that, but I couldn't get into the form. So I just thought that would be easier because then it's all here and I just list the information underneath it. And then once I have the minutes done, obviously Charlie and I review them and they get sent out to all of us. Do I
Then
send
I
them?
get copies.
You get copies and you guys are
Because I
going to be on the
put minutes
CC.
in.
Yeah, okay. So mostly I want to know, is it possible to get into this form without having to retype it?
Don't we get it in the email?
We do, but you can't get into it.
It's a PDF.
Like a document.
It comes as a PDF and it comes as something else. And let me play around a little bit. I just quickly tried to do that yesterday. Maybe if I save it somehow differently.
We'll work together to figure out how you
Okay.
can transmit your ideas into the minutes.
They can put
Sounds
notes
cool.
on it.
It
That should be easy. I'm the last person to give technical advice,
Yeah,
but that sounds like
probably-
something
It
that.
sounds like something I should be able to do easily. Okay, thank you.
The time is 1:07 and we are now adjourned. Thank you all so much.